In this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make this homemade beef gravy, and I'm going to show you the old-fashioned way for making it as well. And I'm going to start off with my 3-quart saucepan, and you can probably get away with using the 2-quart saucepan, but I like to use the bigger saucepan, just to be on the safe side. And I'm adding 1/4 cup of unsalted butter to the saucepan. That's equivalent to a half stick of butter. And I'm going to heat the butter on medium heat until it's completely melted. And then once it's completely melted, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly add flour to the saucepan. And I'm going to constantly stir the flour as I'm slowly and gradually adding it as well. You don't want to add too much too quickly because then you'll end up with clumping, and you want to avoid clumping. So again, you want to add it slowly and gradually as I'm doing on the screen while stirring it constantly as you add it. Now, young people just love to reinvent the wheel, and the new school way of making gravy is using the cornstarch. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but there's a reason Grandma would make a roux for her gravy. So the risk with the cornstarch when you're mixing it with that cold water and adding it to the hot liquid for the gravy, you risk getting a bunch of clumps. That risk is much lower if you just make a roux. And also, there's the added flavor from the butter as well when you make the roux. So I prefer making a roux for my gravy, and that's the method I'm showing you in this video. So now that I've added all of the flour, I'm going to continue stirring it. And you're going to want to cook the roux until it turns to a color somewhere ranging between peanut butter and caramel, as you see on the screen. I tested this using an electric stove or an electric stove top, so it took me about 9 to 12 minutes, but it may vary slightly depending on the type of stove top that you're using. And now what I'm doing now is adding the beef broth for the gravy, and I'm using about 2 cups of beef broth. I'm using unsalted beef broth as well, and you can use salted beef broth as well. You would just omit the salt that we're going to add later on. And just like with the flour, you want to add a little bit of the beef broth at a time while constantly stirring. So I'm not sure who heard this story. We all know about Colonel Sanders. He founded KFC. Back in the 60s, he was getting up in age, and he decided to sell the chain to some investors. A few years later, those investors sold the chain to a big corporation, and that big corporation started making all sorts of changes to his recipes and processes. Colonel Sanders sued that corporation, and they reached a settlement, and as part of the settlement, they agreed to have him train the cooks, as well as keep many of his processes and recipes in place. As for his secret recipe chicken, the one thing he was really anal about was his gravy. And when he discovered this corporation started serving frozen gravy shipped in from a plant, he went off on him. Colonel Sanders was known as a mild-mannered guy, but he cussed them the heck out. And he really wasn't happy with the operations at all until the day he died, even though he still appeared in commercials. And since his passing, KFC was sold again to PepsiCo and now its current owner, Yum Brands, and we know it's a sad shell of its former self. I just added 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce to the gravy mixture, and I'm still continuing to stir. But getting back to the story, the reason I shared that story is because Colonel Sanders understood the importance of serving good gravy alongside his main dishes. He took pride in making it fresh and entirely from scratch. And we're going to add some seasonings to this gravy as well because no one's trying to eat any bland gravy. So I added garlic powder, onion powder, basil, oregano, salt, and white pepper. And you can see the exact measurements linked in the description below. And I'm continuing to stir until all of those seasonings are well blended with the gravy mixture. Now the stovetop has been set on medium heat this entire time, and the next step is a bit of a judgment call on your part. So there's Gordon Ramsay, who insists that gravy should be on the thin side, and I love me some Chef Ramsay, but I respectfully disagree with him. Of course, gravy shouldn't be as thick as paste, but I think there's a safe middle ground. I think the gravy should be at least thick enough to somewhat coat the back of a spoon. And that's how long I'm going to cook it in this video. And to achieve that consistency, it took me about 10 to 15 minutes of additional heating on medium heat to achieve that. And if you prefer a thinner gravy like Gordon Ramsay, you can certainly cook the gravy for less time than that. And I did cook this on an electric stovetop as well, so cooking times may vary slightly if you use an induction stovetop or a gas stovetop. Now I'm just going to transfer it to my gravy boat, and it is ready to serve. Now, if you prefer not to use beef broth, you can certainly substitute, say, 4 tablespoons of beef drippings with 2 cups of water to achieve the same flavor and texture for the gravy. And there you have it. And if you enjoyed this recipe and would like to see more of this content, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.